Anatomy 32, Chapter 23, the Respiratory System. Topics are some disorders of the respiratory system and respiration. So, some disorders of the respiratory system are intentionally inflicted on someone's respiratory system. And smoking is one of those things where people are intentionally leading to problems for their lungs. Effects of smoking include being easily winded. This is because nicotine, the addictive chemical in tobacco, actually constricts the terminal bronchioles, decreasing the amount of air that can flow through them. Also in the smoke is carbon monoxide, which binds to hemoglobin and actually binds more effectively than oxygen, thereby reducing the blood's oxygen carrying capacity. And then the various irritants in the smoke increase mucus production as a way to try to remove those irritants from the air, but that therefore fills up space, which impedes airflow. In addition to that, the irritants inhibit and destroy cilia, making it more difficult to move mucus and irritants out of the lungs, which of course then leads to the smoker's cough as a way to remove that mucus. And then also, smoke can damage the elastic fibers of the lungs, and this can lead to the potential collapse of bronchioles, making less air being able to travel to fewer alveoli, which then makes gas exchange less efficient. Now, it's worth noting that all smoke inhalation is bad, whether it's tobacco, marijuana, burning plastic. Now, some kinds of smoke are worse than others. Burning plastic is probably one of the more damaging kinds of smokes out there, but overall, you should try to avoid inhaling smoke, especially on a regular basis. Vaping has also become found to be somewhat bad for the body, although not as damaging to the lungs. It still has a negative effect. All right, over time, smoking or other health issues can lead to emphysema. Emphysema is the destruction of the alveolar walls. So the alveoli themselves break down. So here is an image of healthy lung tissue, and then this is an image of someone with emphysema. And the breakdown of the alveoli leads to dramatic decrease in gas exchange. This is non-repairable. It will not get better for the person. They can only hope it doesn't get worse. And the common treatment for someone with emphysema is to have them on oxygen so that the oxygen levels in the air they're breathing in are much higher, thereby increasing gas exchange. Lung cancer. Lung cancer can be caused by smoking, can be caused by other things, but people who smoke are more likely to get lung cancer than people who don't. Lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer in the US and also has a very high death rate. Most people diagnosed with lung cancer die within the first year. Breathing is important. And here we see this lovely picture of a non-smoker's lungs versus a smoker's lungs. And it turns out all that dark material is carcinogenic. One kind of lung cancer is bronchogenic carcinoma, which is the most common kind of lung cancer, and this cancer starts in the lining of the epithelium of the bronchial tubes. And that makes sense because they are the first part of the lungs that will be exposed to the smoke or other irritants. One treatment for lung cancer is a lung transplant, which of course requires someone who has healthy lungs to die, and then for someone to be a good match for those lungs and have them placed in their body. As you can see, looking at this person who's had a lung transplant, it almost looks like they got cut in half based on that scar across their body. All right, respiration. Respiration is the bringing in and out of air. Respiration has many levels to it. First, there's pulmonary ventilation. That is the exchange of air between the atmosphere and the air spaces in the lungs. So when we breathe in and out, that is pulmonary ventilation, air going from the atmosphere into the lungs and then from the lungs into the atmosphere. External respiration occurs at the respiratory membranes. So it is when oxygen diffuses from the air into the bloodstream and carbon dioxide diffuses from the bloodstream into the air of the alveolus. So external respiration occurs deep in the lungs themselves. And there's internal respiration. Internal respiration is the exchange of gases between blood capillaries and the body's tissues. So here we would have oxygen leaving the bloodstream and entering the tissues of the body, and carbon dioxide leaving the tissues and entering the bloodstream. Then, of course, the oxygen will eventually make it into the cells and into the mitochondria, where it can undergo cellular respiration using that oxygen when producing ATP in the mitochondria. So again, pulmonary ventilation, air going from the atmosphere to the lungs. External respiration, gas exchange between the air in the lungs and the bloodstream. Internal respiration, gas exchange between the bloodstream and the tissues of the body. All right, during pulmonary ventilation, there's two main phases. Inhalation being the first, inhalation, breathing in. Inhalation occurs when the air pressure in the lungs is less than the atmospheric pressure. So gases like to move down the pressure gradient, like to go from higher pressure to lower pressure. Now, in order to decrease the air pressure in the lungs have to be stretched, and thereby stretching them and increasing the volume in the lungs. So increased volume in the lungs, that decreases the air pressure in the lungs. The muscles involved in this are the external intercostals and the diaphragm. The diaphragm, when it contracts, will pull down, stretching the lungs inferiorly, and the external intercostals, when they contract, they will pull the ribs up and out, which will allow the lungs to increase in volume superiorly and out laterally. So again, we're doing this in order to increase the volume in the lungs because that decreases the air pressure in the lungs. And then air would flow from the atmosphere into the lungs. Exhalation is the opposite. This is where we want to get the air out of the lungs and into the atmosphere. So again, gas likes to move down the pressure gradient, likes to go from high pressure to low pressure. So to do this, we need to increase the pressure in the lungs so that it's higher than the atmospheric pressure. Turns out this is pretty easy. The way to do this is just relax the muscles that caused inhalation. So by relaxing the diaphragm and relaxing the external intercostal muscles, the lungs, with their elastic fibers, will recoil back to their original size, decreasing the volume of the lungs. So you decrease the volume of the lungs, this leads to an increase in air pressure in the lungs. Air will go from the lungs out into the atmosphere. So again, to exhale, normally, all you need to do is relax the diaphragm and external intercostal muscles. The lungs will automatically return to their original volume, decreasing their volume, increasing their pressure, causing the air to leave the lungs. Now, it is possible to engage in what's called forced exhalation. This is when we use the contraction of some muscles to cause air to leave the lungs much more rapidly, important for yelling or singing or laughing. Examples of muscles that can aid in this include the abdominal muscles, the obliques, the rectus abdominis, as well as the internal intercostal muscles. They can all contract, reducing the volume of the lungs much faster. All right, we know that breathing must be controlled. It's controlled in the brain, specifically within the brain stem. There are respiratory centers found in the medulla oblongata, and the respiratory centers in the medulla oblongata control the basic rhythm of breathing and controls the muscles that have to contract for breathing, so the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscles. So medulla oblongata's respiratory center is critical for basic breathing. The pons also has respiratory centers, and there it is to coordinate the transition between inhalation and exhalation. Basically, the respiratory center in the pons, its goal is to make sure we don't breathe in too deeply, that it damages the lungs. So it prevents us from breathing in too deeply. And that is it for chapter 23.